Hi everyone, welcome back. We're going to continue on now with a little bit of a tour of our character rig, and we'll also adjust a couple of settings as well just to make sure that we're going to be able to work with the audio file that we've chosen. So let's start off by actually taking a look at the model itself. This is sort of mainly based on an older version of this model that I did quite a few years ago. I've updated it a little bit. I've put new ears on the character that look a hell of a lot better than the old ones. You'll see the old ones in that demo video as well. I've tweaked the nose shape a little bit just to make it look a little nicer. I've also added in there's a little bit of a kind of crease down here around the sides of the mouth under the cheekbones. So you can kind of see that in there. I'm not too fussed with that, but yeah, whatever. The rest of the character's more or less pretty much the same. One of the big changes I have made is I've actually added a tongue inside the mouth, and I've also added in a jaw control and a tongue control over here. So aside from the animation systems that allow us to kind of make mouth shapes that are open, we can also further adjust the position of the jaw using this controller down here, but we'll get into that a little bit further on down the line. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're not going to be touching the model at all. Everything that we're going to do is going to be based on these little control handles around here. Okay, so it would probably be best to come to the top of your screen here and turn off the select surfaces option just here. So that way when you click on the model, you can't actually select it. Okay, so that's a little button here. If this is missing, make sure that this little arrow thing here isn't collapsed, this little bracket, and that'll kind of fold it out. For those of you that are using your software at less than full screen, you might find that Maya has automatically folded some of these closed on those the little divider brackets. Okay, so let's start off with the rig controls. We've got the master control down here. You'll notice that that's named at the top here. So that's the master control, and pretty much you can use that to position the object around. Now, I would suggest to not touch that unless you're going to have more than one of these characters in the same file at the same time. If you're thinking of having two characters talking to one another, before you do it, let me know, and I'll sit down with you individually and we'll go through the process of basically getting two of these into the one file at the same time. Okay, so that's the master control, and that pretty much just moves everything, positions everything. The next control that we've got is this little, it's actually not little, it's the biggest one. It's basically a cross arrow like this. What this does is allows you to select it, and this is the control for the head, and it works on rotation. So if you turn your rotate tool on, you can basically rotate the guy's head around like this, so you can get him to kind of do this. Now this is limited. You'll need to be aware that if you move the head too far to the side, his mouth will pull apart. Okay, it's just one of the limitations of this rig. It's not a very complicated rig. So although you can kind of make his head move a little bit side to side, this is really only supposed to be designed to kind of get his head to wobble a bit when he's talking. It's not meant to be a full-blown kind of positional thing like this. So just bear that in mind. Don't push it too far to either side, and that way his mouth won't kind of look like he's having a stroke. Okay. This control here, this little cross, is called the eye target control. Basically what we do with this one is use the move tool, and what we want to do is pretty much move this up and down and side to side, and what that allows us to do is actually position the eyes and make him look around like this. Okay, so you can get him to look around like that. Now, in order to get this back to its starting point, over in the channel box, you just change translate X and Y back to 0, and that will reposition it for you. And that's pretty much the same for any of the other controllers as well. So for example, with this head control, it only allows you to change the rotate values here. Okay, so with these ones, basically you just change those back to 0 and it'll recenter itself. Okay, so down to the newer controllers. You might not need to really bother with these too much, but I added them in just as a little bit more of a flexibility thing. We've got a jaw control. Okay, once again, this is a positional based system, so it only works with the translate values. And once again, we can move them up and down, and we can also move them side to side. So for example, if you was chewing some chewing gum, you could animate this, keyframe this to go around and around in a circle and make it look like he's a bit of a slack jaw gum chewer. So we can do that. Now the other one in there is the tongue control. So you'll notice he's got this tongue in the back. If I grab this tongue control, I can move this sort of forwards and backwards, and that'll basically just allow me to position his tongue a little bit better. This one is very limited. You can go side to side with it as well, but don't try and pull it out. His tongue won't come out like this. He can't stick his tongue out because I don't have a stretchy rig system set up on the tongue. That's something that we can do, but it is a lot more advanced. So just for the time being, this is really more just to position his tongue into sort of a nicer position when you've got him, you know, talking with his mouth open like this. So that's what the tongue control is. Once again, if you reset it, you can just type in zeros for the 3 values. That'll kind of put it back to where it is. Note that the tongue doesn't actually move with the jaw. I've left it separate so that it's a little bit more easy to control. Sometimes you'll get kind of additional movement on the tongue when it was connected through to this controller. So I've left them both separate basically. That's the basic controls. And we can add keyframes to these like any other object. So it's just a case of keyframing the positions and so on, which we've covered in class already. Okay, so that's the basic tour of the controls and the rig. Okay, we do have some layers down here. Basically, you shouldn't need to touch these. If you want to put some basic hair on the character, I do have a little hairstyle. It's just basically a side parting mummy haircut. You can just turn that hair layer on. For those of you who are sort of wanting to maybe add some additional things on, like maybe a hat or something, if you want to model a hat or something, or even maybe some sunglasses or something like that, have a chat to me, and if you build the model, I can kind of show you how to connect it onto the rig so it pretty much will work with the character's rig system. Okay, but that's something that we can kind of do on an individual basis for those that want to. So yeah, you can turn the hair on and off just here, pressing the V button, but other than that, don't play around with any of these because that could actually disconnect parts of the rig and stop the thing from working properly. Okay, before I end this video, I just want to show you guys a couple more settings to make sure that your audio functions correctly. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a look at the some settings for the timeline. The first one, if we right click in the timeline, the first thing we need to do is make sure our playback speed is set to real time. If you set it to one of the others, you might find that the audio doesn't play. Okay, so we need to work in real time. Another thing that we can do is if you're having trouble seeing all your audio on the timeline, mine's very short for the demo, but if you've got a long line of dialogue, what you can do is set range to and select sound length, and that will readjust the length of your timeline to the length of your audio clip. Okay, now that also includes if you've got silence in your audio clip, like I do. I've got about 3 frames or 4 frames of silence at the beginning, and then about another 6 or 7 frames at the end. It includes that. Okay, so this is the duration of the sound file. It's not going to read where the actual noises can be heard in the file. All right. So if you want a bit of a gap, and I'd suggest maybe if you're kind of recording something, leave a gap of silence, put like a silence in, like a little gap of maybe a second or so before the audio starts. and then you can leave a bit of a gap after as well. That way your audio and your movement doesn't start right on frame 0. Okay, so you can set your range there. Now, talking of where you can start your audio from, we can actually adjust where the audio starts. So if I right click in the timeline and I come down to sound, you'll notice it lists the audio tracks that I import here. Now, if they don't show up in this list after you've imported them, it generally means that that audio will not work with Maya, and you'll have to go and re-record perhaps, or like re-export it out with different settings. So if your audio does work, it'll show up down here. Now, what you can do is click on this options box. That'll open up the attributes for the sound file, so you can see that the sound file name is there. This offset number here allows you to change the starting time of your audio track. So for example, if I type in 10 here, I should find that the start of the audio track jumps to frame 10. So I'll type in 10 and hit enter. You can see now that the actual audio wave has moved up the timeline and it now starts on 10. So I'm going to get 0 audio here, then the audio is going to begin. So in this case, because this is also kind of silence that's been recorded into the track, I'm going to get 10 frames of silence for 0 audio being in the timeline, and then I'm going to get 3 frames of, I should say frames, I'm going to get 3 frames where there's silence in the audio clip, like that. Now, once again, don't forget you can extend your timeline length up here. You can add a higher number here to extend it until you've gotten to approximately the frame where the audio ends. Okay, so you can just do that manually. Okay. Now keep in mind the source end and source start values just here do not indicate where the audio is playing from. So in this case, frame 10, and where they're going to, which is frame 37. Okay, this is basically just telling you how long your audio is. It doesn't tell you where in the timeline it is, which is, once again, that's one of the limitations of this audio system in Maya. It really has no settings for audio, or timeline durations and stuff, a bit like After Effects does, for example. So it's pretty rudimentary. If you need to mute your audio, you can just click this mute button as well. The silence value here works in a very similar way to offset. In fact, from what I've seen, it's pretty much identical. So I wouldn't mess around with the silence value. Okay, if you change these, it can actually clip audio off your audio file. So I probably wouldn't play around with those too much either. Okay, I think I'm going to leave this video here. If you play it,
hi there,
you should hear the audio.
Hi there.
Okay, if you've changed all those settings, and when you scrub through the timeline,
hi there,
you can also hear it then as well. But because you're dragging through and it's not going to be at the proper speed that it plays, the audio is going to sound kind of jerky when you scrub through, but that's okay. All right, I'm going to leave this here, and in the next video, we're going to actually take a look at some keyframing to start animating. So I'll see you then.